Good morning and welcome to today's webcast, Active Business Planning and Insights for Wineries and Growers. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Bill Vyenielo and Loren. Bill has been working with clients in the wine industry for more than 25 years and has been solving operational challenges for vineyard and winery clients since 2006. He works with owners and managers to successfully develop and manage their winery operations and build their brands, providing guidance in strategic planning, sales and marketing, and winery and vineyard production and development. Loren has provided business process and information technology consulting services since 1993. He is a leader of the firm's Business Solutions Group, a business software development group within Moss Adams Consulting focused on delivering leading-edge technology solutions for clients across a variety of industries. Loren's experience includes business process improvement design and delivery, systems integration, project management, and a program management office leadership. And with that, Bill, I'll turn the line over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about business intel and how you can use it. A lot of technology is evolving quickly today, and there are a lot of tools that are becoming available to us in the industry. So a quick recap of what we're going to cover today. Talk briefly about business intel applications, and then adaptive insights. It's one of the leading business intelligence applications available to us today. We're going to go over what it does, how a winery can use it, and also I'll talk a little bit about some feedback I've had from winery users that have been using it for a good year or more. We'll do a recap of the benefits, a little overview on that and how you can use it and give you some examples. Also just talk, I think, a little bit about the costs of this technology and how the cost is being driven down. Some very, very powerful features available to not just large wineries, but to mid-size and even small wineries. And then we may talk a little bit about how you implement it and explain the process that's involved. So what's a business intelligence app? It's really software that's giving managers new insights across their business. It's making it easier to see and understand how the business is performing overall, and it's giving you information faster, it's more accurate, and that way you're able to make decisions, not only better decisions, but faster decisions. The way it works is this business intelligence app can retrieve data, analyze it, and report it. It's generated from data gathered across the company, across all departments, and oftentimes it's linked to multiple software applications. You may have applications in production, sales, and the accounting team. So I think the key thing here is it works with software that you're already using and that you already know. So it's working in parallel with systems you've already invested in. And Adaptive Insights is one of those business intelligence applications that's really taking a leadership role. It was founded by a CFO who was looking for a better way to put the big picture together. He was dealing with a lot of data overload, trying to pull everything together from the company and get away from the maze of spreadsheets that oftentimes have errors in them. So trying to look for ways to use technology to free himself up so he could see the big picture. And they've developed Adaptive Insights, which is now being recognized by some of the leading industry analysts for its capabilities and ease of use. The fact that it's cloud-based technology makes it easier for any of us to access and monitor business performance from almost from wherever you are at any time of the day. So independent of one another, employees can check in on their area of responsibility without interrupting anybody else and get a very quick read on how the business is performing within their area of responsibility. So we'll look at some of the things that Adaptive does give you. From a management perspective, you have dashboards, analytics on key performance indicators. It's very powerful when it comes to budgeting, forecasting, and then reporting that's comprehensive and visually delivers information that's easy to understand. I was thinking that, Loren, I was going to ask you if you have any insights on how you've seen Adaptive being used.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we see with our clients is really a progression. In many, many cases, the beginning part is with the foundational areas, so forecasting, budgeting, and mixing those together with comparisons to the actual results as they roll in. But that quickly progresses into a lot of what-if analysis, and that's where you begin to see a lot of the deep engagement with the numbers, because it becomes a go-to place to look at how results are coming in, and the budget and planning forecasting numbers are right there mixed together. It quickly leads to engagement across the team, good conversations, and strategic discussions. So that's really been our experience there.
Great. And I just skipped through this. When we talk about data overload, a lot of it is just the fact that we have so much paper, so much information, or I don't even call it information, I call it data points. It's very easy to get overloaded and wrapped up in the tasks of collecting information, validating or making sure it's accurate, and it leaves very little time to do higher level work where you're really analyzing the information, understanding what it means, and then figuring out what direction and what decisions to make. That's one of the things that Adaptive is being very helpful at freeing up some time.
Yeah, and when you're freeing up that time, really what it gets into is the value of business analytics. And so, as you see here on the bullet list, that not only does it lead to faster decision making, but because of the visibility, the ability to look at that data, see trends, you can begin to optimize your prioritization to see quickly what is important, what is not. But in addition to that, because you have a system that's pulling together both your actuals and your forecast and keeping that a live conversation, you increase the credibility of the numbers. So an example we see here often is, instead of in management meetings spending the first 10 or 15 minutes questioning the numbers and where'd you get your numbers from back and forth, I'm sure you've all been part of that discussion. There's credibility. We're all looking at the same thing. We know where they come from, how they were built, and that leads to more engaged conversations where in those conversations you become more agile in terms of being able to make decisions and move the business forward.
So when we think about how our time's spent in the day, it doesn't really matter if you're in the accounting department or production department. There's a lot of time spent looking at the operations, and this diagram here is addressing kind of the activities in the financial area, but it really applies across all departments. There's so much time spent right now working on tasks, getting things processed, pushing the paper along, maybe the next department, notifying people of things. But it's just really the lower quality, lower value work that takes up a lot of our time. And they've done studies on this, and currently what's often found is half of people's time is spent doing this more mundane task. 30% is spent pulling information together into a format that you can report, but really only about 20% of our time is spent on the more strategic, higher value, more comprehensive views of company. And what Adaptive is helping do and other business intelligence applications are helping do is really turn this on its head and free up your day, so you have much more time to spend on the higher value, important decisions, strategic information, strategic meetings, and freeing up people so that they can look forward and be free of the task-driven, more mundane type of work that's lower value, not only to you but to the company as a whole.
Yeah, so CPM, Company Performance Management, it's also widely known as Corporate Performance Management, but the emphasis here is really around performance management and looking at how your organization is performing and the results that are coming in, but also planning for that so that there's a proactive move forward to move towards what is achievable. And so in that active planning, it's really about not only creating the plan, but a huge part of it is also communicating the plan, making sure it's very visible throughout the organization. And with that visibility comes both the decision-making capabilities, but then also the engagement across the managers in a more strategic way. So to some degree, regardless of the tool sets that you're using, all organizations are engaged in this performance management. Sometimes it's just called budgeting, sometimes it's forecasting, but any of those activities are part of it. What this conversation is about is really kind of amping that up and using tool sets that help to make that a very lively conversation to move the organization forward. So not just budgeting, but having the forecasting models and the dashboards that are highly accessible really adds to effectiveness. And having analytics in the models behind it that are pointing out trends makes it really effective. So at the bottom of the screen there, there's that key question that if you ask and see how can you get to how can you be more effective with the efforts that you're putting in, and how can that translate into improved results? So with that, there's, of course, lots of forecasting for wineries, in particular because of the length of the product cycle, going through, not weeks or months, but, years long. And so having tool sets that help to work through Whatif Analysis, forecasting analytics, and then taking those future sales projections and not only making them visible and actively planned for your sales and marketing department, for your production department, but having the tool sets also roll that back through all of the product cycle. So, through bottling materials, bulk wine, all the grapes required by variety, acreage. As you put in the projected sales going forward, let that driver roll it back and then show you here's the results of those kind of decisions. What it helps you to do is to forecast out into the future, and then the models come back and help you make decisions today so that you're well prepared for those for the future growth that needs to be planned, and then look at that across channels and the like as well. So Bill, I think you've had some feedback from wineries along that line as well.
Right, I did. And one of the things that I've learned is maybe through the School of Hard Knocks here, but one of the best ways to gauge how good something is, and it doesn't need to be software, but it applies to almost anything you're looking at investing in, is to talk to people who have been using, in this case, Adaptive Insights. And I went to a dinner. There were a group of wineries that had been using Adaptive for between a year to 2 years. And so I listened to what they had to say, and I've bullet pointed those here. But what I can't convey on the screen here is really the enthusiasm that I was seeing firsthand, just listening to these people talk about how Adaptive had made their work so much easier. So the body language, the enthusiasm I saw really carried quite an impact to me. It made quite an impression on me. But the things that I did come away with that night were they had, one winery had been using Adaptive for a year and a half, and they had said that it was costing them 1/5 what their older system had been costing them in terms of their IT budget. This was a financial, an FP&A department, so the finance team. But they were spending 1/5 the amount of money performing their tasks, and they found not only was it much more cost effective, but it was more powerful and easier to use than their previous software. So the other thing that they brought up was in doing budgeting and forecasting, it was so much easier to use. They were able to do the work much more quickly than they'd ever done it before. Because of that, they were not afraid to reforecast. Oftentimes when you're putting a budget together, it's a huge Herculean effort every year to get it done. You're pulling the winemaker together, the vineyard management team together, the accounting team, and marketing department, trying to get everyone's feedback and input. And then once it's done, everybody wants to run for the hills because they have many other things to do. But they found that because this was easier to do, faster, they were able to reforecast quickly, and so they weren't afraid to do it. They were able to reforecast whenever they wanted to, and in fact, they were starting to reforecast probably 2 or 3 times throughout the year. Maybe their crop was a lighter set than they had forecast, or sales were going maybe more rapidly on certain wines than others, and they were able to reforecast their sales plan and reallocate product to markets that were taking it or showing a higher demand than others. Also, the fact that they were able to use this Adaptive Insights application, they were able to shed the need for a lot of cumbersome spreadsheets that typically are involved in putting the budget together from all the different departments. And oftentimes, as many of us have learned over the years, there might be an error in a formula in a spreadsheet. With Adaptive, they eliminated a lot of the error-prone issues. And so because of that, when they were presenting their budgets to a CEO or an owner or management team, because the numbers were more accurate, not only could they be more confident of their projections, but the management team and the owners that were having to make decisions using the information felt much more confident in the numbers themselves. So there's a lot more credibility in the numbers and the forecasts, and you can rely on them and have just greater confidence in looking forward and knowing that your numbers are solid. For the non-accounting staff, they found it easy to use. It looked a lot like Excel just on the screen. So most of us are pretty familiar with Excel. So they weren't intimidated by it. They found it was familiar looking, easy to use, and because the results were fast, the non-accounting people, management of, say, the winemaking team or the vineyard management team or the marketing team, they're not accountants, but they found that the ease of use improved their understanding of the process. They found that they were more willing to get involved and get engaged. So greater engagement by the team. And then non-accounting staff was a tremendous plus because oftentimes, as I've experienced over the years, when you get done with the budget, everybody's done and they want to run off and do their own thing. And the last thing they want to do is come back and have to reforecast or get involved in the cumbersome budgeting process again. The other thing is they found the information that is generated by the system. It's so visually intuitive. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together. If you have a lot of pieces of a puzzle laid out on a table, you have to study every piece to figure out how they fit together. But if you have a picture, you can immediately comprehend what's happening and make quick decisions. So the fact that the information coming out of Adaptive is visually intuitive, It gives you immediate understanding of what's happening, frees up your time, and increases the ability, again, to make smart decisions and improve your department's performance. The other aspect that they brought up was the fact that it's a cloud-based system. It's always online. It's always maintained and always up to date. So any improvements that are made in the system are always there. They're automatically uploaded. So it's not software that you have resident at the winery that you have to upload improvements to. That's all taken care of by Adaptive. So those are the things I heard at dinner that night. And again, I can't convey the enthusiasm or the body language that I saw, but just a very, very convincing dinner that I wanted to, made me want to learn more about Adaptive and how we could use it to help manage more effectively here in our wine industry. I talked a little bit about sort of the typical budgeting process. It's heavily Excel-driven. There's a major effort required in pulling information together from the different departments. You have to pick your spots on when to grab the winemaker. What time of the year is it? What time of the year is he going to be willing to, or have the time to be involved in the budgeting process? Same thing with the vineyard crew. We talked a little bit about formulas, errors in formulas in Excel sheets. They're very common. So it's that inefficiency that is kind of inherent in using an Excel-based approach. And it's a real challenge to roll everything together from the different departments, the different Excel sheets that are coming from different people. Everybody has their own view on how to build things and put things together. And then once you get it pulled together, when it's time to make changes, again, it's tough to do. It ripples through the entire process. So you can't just make one quick update and have it roll through to the end result like you can with Adaptive Insights. Another comment here is even just adding a new account can break your formulas in an Excel spreadsheet. And again, the fact of collaboration, it's tough to collaborate with an Excel-based budgeting process. Then there are also the concerns nowadays to be thinking about if you're emailing files, there's always a risk of protecting confidential information. And then the difficulty in sort of the knowledge transfer. I already know how to run this spreadsheet, but somebody else might look at it and just be flummoxed because they may look at it in an entirely different way. So, and when you have someone leave a company, they've built a multitude of spreadsheets, a lot of knowledge walks out the door. That is not the case when you use a system like Adaptive. So essentially, you're looking at better tools to help reduce the effort and increase access to information. So you might talk, Loren, a little bit about just engaging managers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you're pointing out, the ease or difficulty of the process has a lot to do with if managers are engaged or not. But if they are engaged, it is really powerful because it brings in that multiple different perspectives that leads to engaging conversations. So usually you end up with a better view into what is the business environment that you're working with. But here, by means of comparison, we're comparing the typical annual process where many times it's about protecting my budget. Do I have what I need and have planned for to keep my programs going? And a fairly narrow perspective. And as you were pointing out, Bill, it's a time-consuming annual requirement, and when it's done, it just feels like it's it's kind of a heavy lift, and it becomes a bit unresponsive to changing situations going forward because of that heavy lift. So, in tooling up, if you will, to put together something that is, or implement something that is more powerful, you end up with regularly engaging managers in a company strategy. So what that means is with ease of access to information and ease of access to change that and do Whatif analysis, it makes a much richer conversation. And through further slides here, when we get into it, we'll talk a lot about different really key components of what makes that effective, like this rolling forecast, decision-making windows, and accountability. So all of those things being key parts of pulling together what is making managers much more effective within the organization. There's a framework that we like to use to help communicate the conversation as we're going through and implementing a CPM type process. And it's this model here where you are looking forward to the future regularly in all your conversations. But that's always grounded in the reality of where have we been in the past and how do we get from here to there. With that, the conversation becomes about what do we need to do right now in the present in decision making so we can get from where we are to where we want to go. Having that in a well-communicated visual display and the ability to quickly change the numbers and do what-if analysis allows you to investigate what's possible in the future and then chart that place from where we've been in the past to decisions that we need to make today. And so as an example of that, we've kind of all heard of this driving from the rearview mirror. You're driving forward and you're really doing that from where you've been. But where you really want to get to is this full 360 view. So not are you only looking at where have we been, but you're looking forward to where can we go, and then what is the environment that we're working within. So bring in more than just financial information, but bring in interesting information and mix that together with the results and see how that correlates. Looking at customers and channels and all of the things that really are the lifeblood of your organization and have that as part of the conversation. I think, Billy, you've had some experience around this too, specifically in the wine industry.
Certainly, there are lots of examples, but I think the kind of the analogy of driving a car, it's kind of like if you're on the freeway and you're behind a bus, you can't see ahead of where you want to go. You don't have time to plan the route you want to take. You're always in a kind of a reactive mode of the brake light's going to come on and that bus ahead of me. And so there's very little time to be thinking about where you're going. You're focused on the immediate, kind of be in a reactive mode rather than when you can look down the road, you can be proactive. And so it's a completely different dynamic when you're in a situation where you can see where you're headed. And in my mind, when you're running a winery, it's really important to know what's the vision. What are you all driving together toward? So just from a big picture standpoint, when you have the ability to plan ahead and look ahead and think and decide what course to take, you're always driving toward what's the vision and we're all working toward as collectively as a team. So I'm not going to bring up specific examples, Loren, but I think just from a big picture standpoint, having the information that gives you a 360-degree view of where have you been, based on where have we gone, how can that help us drive forward, keeping the vision in mind of what your company is, of what that vision your company has, and how you can all work collaboratively together to get there is really what this diagram is all about.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Phil. And so CPM, while it is it's a fairly large subject, it's rarely, in fact, really never implemented all in just one fell swoop. In fact, it's highly recommended that it's taken in a phased approach. So 3 common phases that we see are streamlining. This is where you get to the foundational piece and you're making sure that there is the whole process is way easier through automation. And then when the process is easier, it's kind of referring back to those upside down triangles where you're just changing the percentage of times you're spending on moving data around to getting to that more automated, better flow, moving into phase 2. Now we're doing more analytics. We're seeing really more clearly what the drivers are And then with those drivers, it leads to better, not only better decisions, but it allows you to get into more of a strategic discussion. So it's a process of really bringing the organization along in that process, not just the finance team, but the overall team. So, referring back to this model of looking to the future, where we've been in the past, and making decisions for today, it's really a value-driven approach. So it's about putting together a process and having the tools in place where you can truly implement best practices, and it's making it easier for the team to do this, thus getting them more engaged. And with that, empowering the CFOs. What that means is now with the data collection, the analytics, the models in place, it leads to better conversations with CFO, being able to provide more information to their team. And so, tying these two together is about transforming the data into useful information for the stakeholders.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned a little bit about the value of business analytics earlier on. We'll look at some specific things that all of us would be interested in, whether we own or we're helping run a winery or vineyard operation. You're always going to look at that top-line revenue. How can we improve it? How can we increase it, grow it? At the same time, how can we decrease our costs? We're always looking at how to maximize our engagement of team members. People are focused. We want to look at how we can reduce risk in the company. So just some examples, I think, from an analytics standpoint. In my experience, I had a winery and a vineyard owner come to me and say, look, we get these reports from the management team, and can you help us make heads or tails of these? And I took a look at a couple months' reports, and they had about an 85-page report every month that they were receiving. And it had your standard income statement and balance sheet with your receivables and payables and bank reconciliation information. There was just tons and reams of information. But I'd go through that. I'd spend maybe an hour or more on 1 month's information. And at the end of it, I don't think I knew more about the company than I knew at the start. And so what I did is I went through and I created some summary, what I call flash report, reports that had just focused on key performance indicators. And I introduced those, gave them to the management team, gave them to the owner. And so now every month they send that information to the management team. They share it with their peers within the different departments. The owner has told me, and they send me the reports now, I can literally take it's a 3-page report, and within 10 to 15 minutes, I know exactly how they did this month versus budget, how they did versus the prior year. It takes me 10 to 15 minutes, and I know where they're at, I know where they're going, comparison to their plan. So just a really clear example to me of how having information in the right format, focusing on the business analytics that are really of value, frees up your time and gives you the ability to make quick decisions and not get buried with data overload. Now we're going to talk a little bit about just strategies to transform. Loren's talked a little bit about company performance management, and oftentimes it's called corporate performance management, but looking at how to streamline your planning, look at how to be more agile with your decisions based on having better reports and better planning tools that give you a much better insight into the overall performance of the company. So we'll focus on 6 strategies to help improve or transform your company's performance. Part of that starts with really people, having the tools to collaborate and having tools that are integrated. in this case, software tools or systems that are integrated. Talk a little bit about the ability to leverage technology, so it allows you to be self-serve on demand, call in as you're available to check on performance, and then look at what drivers to use when you're planning ahead, how to automate your key performance indicators and improve your dashboard reports, your management reports, and then also how to focus on KPIs, so which ones to focus on, because we can all, in my mind, create many different things to track, but what are the real key performance indicators to focus on, and how to engage your managers. So Loren's going to talk a little bit more about these specific areas.
Yeah, so for the first one there, structure for joint collaboration, the kind of key words there is that being collaborative. And traditionally, the finance team kind of plays an outsized role here where the process is really owned by them. They drive it. They have to do all the work to consolidate. But yet, having these goals along the bottom here of cost aligned around revenue, improving accuracy, more informed decisions, that's really the goal and desire of the entire team. So in implementing the process, it's about being collaborative so everybody is aligned and sharing information and having the tool sets that help roll that together to work on those and put the finance team in a position to really lend their expertise into the process. So if you're to look at it, as it is typically done, you have your different departments. They're all out there putting together their own budgets. And hopefully it comes together. You kind of know the routine. You get those spreadsheets back. They don't really align. You send it out, and then you have to say, "Whoops! Now we're going to have to change that up." And you send them out again, and you end up with one version and then another version. So you get to the final version. Really, by implementing tools, it's about integrating them together, so that as each one is working together or entering their budgets, they're seeing how that works together with other departments and how their results are playing into the overall strategy. So again, while that process is being put together, in front of them is also the strategic planning information. Where do we want to go? And where are we today? What decisions are we trying to make today? And Bill, you probably have some experiences along this front as well in integrating these processes together.
You're right, Loren. I've had the situations where when I've been running wineries, I say one winery I came into and I was asked to come in and help turn them around, and what I found is every month I'd have to sit down and export reports out of QuickBooks, import that into Excel, go to the tasting room, get that software application and export their sales information into Excel, then go to the wine club and export the information from another application into Excel. And then there was the trade sales that were actually being collected in QuickBooks. So I had this process every month. It probably took me 8 hours every month to pull the big picture together because I had these disparate, siloed, unintegrated systems. And I knew all along that there had to be a better way, but it was just so frustrating because I had to spend a lot of time doing these mundane tasks to pull the big picture together. So then once I'd have it collected, then I could sit down with the owner or the winemaker and look at, here's the big picture. What does it mean to us? What are the variances? What do they mean? And I have run other wineries where we had a system that at least integrated accounting and production and inventory. And when you have that ability and you're in the middle of a sales campaign, you might be running out of a wine. When you have inventory that's actually integrated with sales activity, it's so amazing to be able to look up and see, what do I still have? What do I have available to sell? You might have someone on the line that has a big order, and if you don't know whether or not you can make that sale, it's embarrassing. and it's intimidating. One winery that I worked for, they had a large order from a distributor. They had 200 case order for a specific wine. And the guy that was tracking inventory on Excel said, we don't have the wine. And then, so they called the distributor and said, sorry, we're out of that wine. The next day, the same guy came back and said, actually, I think we do have it. So they called the distributor up and said, surprise, we can actually fulfill that order. When it actually came time to ship 2 days later, they did not have the wine. So integration of systems can be incredibly powerful, and not only in saving face and running your company much more efficiently, but it can save you just incredible amount of time. All of us know we have work to do, and time is a very precious resource.
Yeah, so the second one here is really about enabling the self-service culture, or the on-demand. And basically, this is all about putting users in the driver's seat. And that means that the information that is presented to them is really presented in real time. So they know when they go to the platform, they're seeing the latest results, they're mixing that together right away with where the plan is and seeing where in the business environment what's happening right now. And the term that I like to use around this is analytical flow. So when a person it's in their mind to go and look and they have the time to do that, they need to be able to look and quickly see what is going on, drill into the numbers, and not have to reach out to someone and ask for another report. Just that step of asking for another report usually ends up delaying the process, interrupts the analytical flow, and that interruption really takes a huge toll in the quick decision-making process that you're really looking for. So that self-service culture means that people can go out and with confidence and credibility in the numbers, be able to do their own ad hoc, be able to work with management, be able to pull together the board reports. And Bill, this is a lot of what you talked about in the reporting you've discussed here as well.
Absolutely. I mean, ad hoc, essentially being able to look up and generate a report, whether it's on screen or on paper. You might get a phone call in the middle of the day and the owner's asking for something. The ability to look that up, generate it quickly, talk with them over the phone or talk with the vineyard manager. When you're working with teams, your management team, you're more focused. It's a different type of information you're typically collecting when you're looking at management type reports, or if you're actually reporting up to an owner or to a board. Oftentimes the content of what you're looking for is quite different. So having the flexibility to drill down, for instance, into specific department information when you're working with a management team, you're looking at maybe more detail. Might be working with the marketing department and looking at sales by distributor and per market or by product. So it's all relevant information. It's information that you and your team have goals around. And so it's a more intimate, more detailed look and drill down, oftentimes when you're having it in your internal management reports. When you're talking with board members or an owner, they want the big picture. They want things summarized, and they want them conveyed visually. So I've been in meetings where, for example, we have a forecast, and in this case it was done in Excel years ago, but we were able to generate information and present it not in a spreadsheet format, but in a visual format. So we have a graph, and it freed up the conversation to a strategic one, where I was able to work with the owner, and he said, well, what if we change our pricing? What if we move more wine from the distributor channel into the DTC channel? We could make those changes, and the picture would change on the graph. So he wouldn't have to spend his time trying to understand the numbers. He could look at the picture and immediately comprehend what the impact would be of making that decision. So it freed us up, changed the whole dynamics of the meeting. really helped us make decisions more quickly, and I was able to utilize the gray matter, the intelligence of an owner who's very, very successful, very smart man, and he didn't have to spend time trying to read a spreadsheet and get lost in the numbers, because we could turn that into a picture that he understood immediately.
Yeah, so the third one here really kind of links on to what Bill was just talking about, and building these driver-based plans and rolling forecasts. There's kind of a shocking statistic out there that the 64% of the annual targets are obsolete in 4 to 6 months. So think about that. All the effort that you pour into your annual budget, you move it out a few months and it just starts to deviate. And what this is really all about is having the tool sets that make it way easier to keep that more relevant. So, comparison of the two here, where the 12-month annual process really has this cliff that's always hanging out there at the end. And as you approach that, your planning horizon just gets shorter and shorter, but with that 64% of it being off, you're really deviating further and further from that plan. This is where rolling forecast really gets you into that ongoing conversation, the strategic planning moving forward. So back to that circle model where are we? Where do we want to go? And what decision do we have to make now? So throughout the year on an ongoing basis, keep making that decision. I think, Bill, that's a lot of what you've been discussing here as well.
Absolutely. And it's kind of, this is a great visual, the 12-month kind of hard start and stop, as opposed to being able to have a rolling forecast, keeping a cushion ahead of you. That it's in one way, like in our industry, we often have grape sales contracts, where they're called evergreen contracts, and as long as everybody's happy, you have an agreed horizon. Maybe it's 3 years or 5 years, and what that does is, if one of the parties wants to end the contract, it gives the other party time to make plans on how to ease out of that and find the resources to replace that contract. In this case, we talk about a 12-month window. We've got that hard stop at the end of the year. It's kind of like having the bus in front of you on the freeway. You can't see, you're not looking ahead. You don't have that, the horizon ahead of you is getting shorter and shorter as you're getting to the end of the year. And if you've got a cumbersome process of doing budgeting, oftentimes it's not even done by December 31st for the next year. Sometimes it'll get done in January. And so it's, the horizon's getting shorter. You're giving yourself less and less time to be able to look down the road, react, plan, and then make a smart, informed decision. And the ability to do a rolling forecast to keep that buffer out ahead of you, you don't have to plan in 12-month batches. You can, in this case with Adaptive, you can do a month at a time. You can roll 2 or 3 months ahead at a time. So you don't have to tackle 12 months at once. You can tackle another year, another month, and another month. But keep that buffer out ahead of you, so you're looking down the road and you're able to make smart decisions. You're giving yourself time to kind of read the field, see what's ahead, make your move, and continue following a strategy or adjust your strategy. But again, it's kind of creates a more of a planning culture in the company, where you're not just looking at things in these 12-month increments. There's more of the start and stop culture that's created around building a budget and then hopefully making it come live. This is, if you're doing things on a rolling month-to-month basis, it's sort of everybody's continually involved in the process and accustomed to keeping things current and up to date.
Yeah, so keeping up to date is not...
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Talk about some of the... I talked a little bit earlier in one of my examples when I was meeting with an owner, and we were able to do some what-if analysis. And that was really using drivers to look at, if we change this, what effect does it have? So maybe talk a little bit about that, Loren, here on this screen.
Yeah. So, it's not just the financial numbers, but it's also looking, which is profitability and how things are performing, but looking at your working capital and your risk. We could put even more icons on here about your business environment in terms of customers and channels and all the other things that are really germane. So it's looking at those drivers, pulling them into the process and making those numbers really visible as well. So that rolling forecast is really talking about the overall business environment that you're operating within. And to that end, having those additional KPIs and dashboards are really key. And so often what we'll see before we start this process is these separate things. So there'll be dashboards or analytics, planning all as separate activities, and then it's up to the person to see basically how they fit together. What our process really does in implementing CPM is take that performance management model and have the overlaps so that when you're seeking, when you're reporting on results and you're creating that awareness, that it is tied right together with the decision-making of how you're going to adapt. And that's tied right together with the models that are helping that decision-making about where you're going to go. Now, ideally, this Venn diagram here is completely overlapped, but it's just hard to present when all the numbers or all the circles are on top of each other. But it's that pulling it together into one comprehensive view that is so powerful. And then, that power really gets you to, what is it? What are the analytics? How do we identify what is driving our growth? And that is done through making it really easy to do Whatif analysis. Take your results, take the market and industry information that you have, mix it together with drivers, and see, what is it that's driving our growth and driving performance and results. And then taking not only internal but external, so you have that full 360-degree view. Remember back to the picture of the cars. Have the whole business environment that you're working within. And then as your team has that conversation together, all with that same credible information, that you can fine-tune those models. And then from there, you're into really making better decisions moving forward. So I think there's some examples that you have here, Bill, about how that visual really comes together.
Yeah, there's a series of slides here I'll walk everyone through, but these are real numbers. I've just eliminated the names, but this is a format, an example of a type of report that a management team, a manager can use to see how are we doing compared to the prior year. So on the left-hand side of this, you'll see a couple years of actual performance. You can compare how you're doing year-to-date at this point in time. In this case, it was 11 months into the year. So where were we 11 months into the year this year versus the prior year? It's focused here on sales for a certain brand and by channel. So cases by brand, by channel, revenue, corresponding revenue. So I was able to see where are we in this point in time versus the prior year, where are we at this time versus the budget, the plan for the year, and what are the variances. So then it's a matter of drilling down to understand what's causing the variances, and also kind of looking forward, where are we in comparison to the entire plan for the year. So this is one example of, in this case, of sales by brand, by sales channel analysis that summarize a lot of information into one-page report. Now, this is a sales trend by sales channel, and you can see on the left a table, Excel. On the right, you can see a picture of what those same numbers are conveying to you. And most of us, the immediacy of understanding something is gravitate to a picture. It's easier to understand what's happening with a picture. Then it takes much more time to study the numbers in a table than it does to simply look at a picture and see what the trend is. In this case, it was comparing tasting room sales from prior years, wine club sales, e-commerce sales, and then wholesale, distributor sales, and then broker sales for multiple years. So we can see our trend, see what was trending up, what was trending down. I wanted to include this, again, to convey the power of using visuals compared to simply using a spreadsheet or a table. Same thinking behind this page here, looking at wine club membership. In this case, we took multiple years, and I had a winery client that was looking at their sales of their standard wines, and then they had developed a single vineyard series of wine, more specifically for their direct-to-consumer sales. And they were seeing good, strong trend in terms of increased demand for these single vineyard bottlings. What we were able to do is turn this into a picture and see how many people were signing up, joining the wine club, what the attrition rate was here in red, and what the net differential between us was to give you your picture of your net growth pattern. So create pictures. You can, obviously, we can use color. Here, in this case, I used red. Red was something negative. This is the attrition rate for membership. So anyway, 3 quick reports that kind of give you a sense for what you're able to do, pull information from multiple sources, and bring it into a nice summarized visual to convey what's happening so you can plan forward.
Yeah, and so when you start talking about KPIs, it's easy to kind of get really wrapped up in them and go, perhaps too far. And so this is really now a call out to say it's good to look at a lot of different metrics and evaluate them, but have in mind towards keeping them key. So basically keeping the K and KPIs. Sometimes we'll ask organizations, do you have KPIs? And if the answer is, well, not so much, then, of course, we need to bring that conversation along. But sometimes they say, like, oh, yeah, we have these hundreds over here. Okay, a little different conversation. Let's talk about what's really meaningful so the message is not diluted. What you're really looking for is making sure that it's comparable over time and between business lines. We have a way of looking at results from prior years and other business lines and have that represented in a way that you can look at what's going on today and it's really comparing apples to apples. And then, just having a few key measures can really tell the big picture. There's just a few examples at the bottom here about really familiar measures, but if you have those and they were really alive, that tells a huge story across organization, and that's only 5 measures that you end up working with there. And so with that, what you really want to do is think about your KPIs telling a story. What's the plot line? What's the trend? And this, Bill, is a lot of what you've been discussing about being able to take data and visualize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next part here again is a call out to again making sure that you're engaging the managers, and there's 2 pieces to this. One is making sure you're staying within the decision-making window. So if information is delayed, then you end up with you really can't make a decision because it's too late. But to have that timely information out in front of your managers and allowing them to identify what the data needs are, it makes it possible for you to actually decide and change the direction that things are going. So fast information, staying in the window, and then there's also this accountability piece. And within accountability, it's really about organizational responsiveness. How quickly can you have your managers be linked up to the information that makes them effective? So it's that timeliness, and then knowing that what you measure gets done. So you want to choose carefully in this accountability. But in doing that, really the eye is towards organizational responsiveness. And I think, Bill, you have some experience around this as well.
Absolutely. I think the the main thing I wanted to convey is really the power of turning data to visuals. And this slide here kind of gives you a summary of some of the types of graphs and charts that use adaptive. You don't have to be burdened by interpreting what the numbers mean. You can quickly, here in this case through the use of color, green can be good, bad can be something to an alarm color. We're all intuitive to some of these colors. So it's just a way to pull together concisely some of the metrics when you're trying to get the big picture management perspective, or from working within a team and a department. You can hone in on certain metrics, as you've talked about, Loren, and they're in the form of a graph. I can think of some simple situations where I've worked with a tasting room manager and we pulled together visitor count, or we pulled together sales per visitor, or the conversion rate of visitors to wine club membership. When we converted it from numbers to graphs, it was so much easier to share that with the rest of the team, and everybody understood what it meant immediately. So you can move on and keep things moving at a high level, get to the decisions much more quickly.
Yeah, so this tool set with Adaptive Insights, there's a field of tools that are out there, but Gartner has really classified them into their famous quadrants, if you will. And if you're not familiar with Gartner's, basically we refer to it as the wine critic of business solutions. So they're out there evaluating the solutions and where they fit in their field. So Adaptive there is in the leader circle. The only other ones in the leader circle are orders of magnitude more expensive and require a huge amount of IT investment to get there. This is the one that really stands alone in terms of cost and ease of implementation and focus on the business user. It really is intended to have the business user, not IT, be in control of that process. So with that, what you really get is the ability to have very powerful tools in front of you at a very reasonable, achievable price.
Loren, one question that's come in while we're talking here is they were asking, what is adaptive cost? I mentioned the cost is being driven down, and it's a very powerful tool, but maybe can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. Just take a couple minutes here. So really Adaptive it's a subscription model. It is an annual subscription by seat count. Typically, you can have 3 to 5 seats annually for $15,000. And then there's a one-time implementation fee to get that foundation set up. But once that foundation is set up, it's really all about making sure the organization is self-sufficient. We see that range anywhere from, depending on if a smaller implementation around the $35,000, and that sets a good foundation and sets up the business to be self-sufficient. What we find is it's really best to look at this from an ROI perspective, where you can, one, often justify this just with a time savings of the team, but as many of our clients will tell us, that's not about that. It says all we need to do is make one good decision every year with this better information, and the ROI is just year over year.
Yeah, and I remember talking to one winery that was using it, and they put the costs into a context that made it really clear to me. They said it was the equivalent of a part-time person in their accounting department, and they were able to work much more efficiently. So that really drove the point home. The other thing maybe you can touch on very quickly would be just maybe talk about the process, what's involved in bringing Adaptive in, and how do you link it up with the software you're already using?
Yeah, it's actually it's a very collaborative process. So in starting into the process within just a few weeks, we like to have the finance team and the other parts management team in the tool with the configuration that's getting built out and seeing their real results inside of the tool, and then in a collaborative way build those models together to have the visibility moving forward and build out the KPIs. So not only is it timely, it's very hands-on, both with the team and the management team. It's pulling in the finance team and the key stakeholders and moving them right along in that whole discussion. It's building out the support model, so ongoing. Not only do you make sure that there's self-sufficiency within the organization and across the team, so it is that ad hoc self-service is set up that way from the get-go, but it's using common skill sets. So it's using, because this is business focused, it's really using the business skills of the team that's within the management team of the organization.
Thank you. I think I want to give everybody back the rest of their day here, but those are two of the questions that stood out to me. There are some other questions, and we'll make sure we follow up with to those individual questions offline.
Yeah, so thank you
to everyone.
For your time today.
Absolutely.
All right. We are just about 5 minutes over. If you had any questions that we did not get to today, we'll be happy to follow up with you after the webcast. And thank you, Bill and Loren, for a great presentation. We have a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. And thank you again for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next time.